guys so much for coming. Hello, Chicago! We are still waiting for one of our panelists to arrive, and spoiler, she's on the poster right there. So we're waiting for Gail. But before we do that, I wanted to make introductions to everybody who is here and sitting with us on the panel. Welcome to Diverse World. That's for Diverse Meetings for Diverse Worlds, moderated by Racebending.com. I'm representing Racebending here. My name is Gabrial Canada. I'm one of the contributing writers for the site. We were founded in 2009 as a reaction and a protest to the casting for Avatar: The Last Airbender when they adapted that into the film. Yes, gasping is correct. That's pretty much the only reaction. Well, essentially what happened is that it induced a fan reaction where they wanted to do something other than just gasp. We wanted to hopefully make it a chance to do something of a positive good and focus on media advocacy and media literacy. And so it became a grassroots movement, and we've got followers and fans in more than 50 countries at the moment, and hopefully some real successes under our belt, and events like the one that we're having today. And because of that, we're able to invite out beautiful people to talk about diversity and talk about what it means to them and how to get this something that we don't have to talk about. But I just want to start again by introducing our lovely panelists here. So we're going to go ahead and start with Ramon Perez. With Professor Turtel Onli. Running over there is Jay Fuller. Everybody, this is Jay's first panel. And then on the end there we have Marjorie M. And then we're just going to go ahead and, as I said, just kind of give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves as well. And just let the audience know about your work and to just kind of pass along the line as we're waiting for, again, our final panelist here, Gail, as well.
I'm currently working with Marvel Comics on Spider-Man Learn to Crawl, which is a kind of a retelling, revisiting of Spider-Man's origins. But I also do work in illustration, comic books. I was actually contacted because my work in Inuit illustration, adapting mythologies passed down verbally by the elders and finally giving them actual visual form after years of not having anything but the visual storytelling. So all the art's approved by the Council of Elders, which has been a fascinating experience.
I was going to interject. So that was Inhabit Media, which, if you guys don't know, it's a Canadian company that is essentially, the purpose of that is that they want to be able to have Inuit people be able to tell their stories in their own words, and to have they bring in artists and other great people to tell them in comics so that they can very much get into the classroom. If you just wanted to elaborate on that. Have you had a chance to ever see any of the classroom music to see those guys do it?
No, I haven't. I've received the books, I've worked on some of the films they've done, but I've never actually participated in some of the events because they're just not really local to where I'm located.
Yeah, local to where it is really relevant. It's strange being called a southerner, but if you talk to these guys, they're allowed to do that because they live in Iqaluit, and it's really high. It's the top of the world. So yeah. And then, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well, Turtel.
Hello, I'm Turtel, and I'm based in Chicago. I come to this by way of, first, I was a major market illustrator. I freelanced for a variety of mainstream publications. And there was a bit of a cataclysm that happened, and I launched something called the Black Age of Comics, which is a movement to diversify the industry, in some ways the same way the music industry was diversified. So thinking there was a golden age, silver age, something called the bronze age, I thought if you're operating from a black, African, urban, or independent experience, that puts you in the black age, and I happen to have a little small book that explains all of that. And looking forward to the discussion we're going to have on the panel, and I want to thank you guys again, women and all, for being here.
Hi, my name is Jay Fuller. I am a webcomic artist and self-publisher. I do a comic called Boy in Pink Earmuffs, which is sort of loosely autobiographical. About that age, about 10, kind of got lovey-dovey with another boy, and we played this terrible edutainment game called Super Solvers. So that's what we called ourselves. We went out into the real world. We filled up our jackets with magnifying glasses and spy kits and solved crimes in the neighborhood. So it's those stories, and it's just sort of from a queer perspective. And then recently I worked with Chad Sell, who does amazing art, drag race art, on another sort of all-ages comic about gender roles. It's called The Sorceress Next Door. And it's about a boy who wants to be a sorceress and has to find the confidence to do that. So I just want to say thanks again for this.
Hi, I'm Marjorie, and I used to be a lawyer, and then I decided that I didn't want to do that, and so I started writing novels. And so I write paranormal romance, urban fantasy. I'm working on a contemporary mystery novel, and I've also written comic books for Marvel. And I just pretty much, not long ago, I finished my run on Astonishing X-Men. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'm Gail Simone, and I've written books for DC Comics, The Secret Six, The All New Adam, Batgirl, the New 52 Batgirl, Birds of Prey, recently The Movement, and also writing Red Sonja for Dynamite and Tomb Raider for Dark Horse.
Final panelist is a writer now. We also have with us today Jean Ha as well, and I'm going to get him up here so that he can introduce himself. We didn't think we had to worry about you because you've been the one tweeting up the storm for us the whole weekend.
I brought somebody a sketch because they've been so nice to me all weekend, and I just got it done and ran over here madly. Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
But no, essentially we were just taking a moment here to introduce everybody on the panel before we got into any more questions. And I just want everybody know we're going to make sure that there is some time for some fan questions as well. And just again, thank you all so much for coming. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Gene.
If I can just make this short, if you're old enough to know this cultural reference, I'm really just here as Gail Simone's Ed McMahon.
I wanted to be Ed McMahon.
That's a good one, Johnny. Let's see you do that.
All right.
So I'm going to kind of get down the line here and start with the questions for at least one question for everybody here on the panel, and then kind of some general questions about diversity for the artists here on the panel and diversity for the writers, and also a little bit about continuity from Turtel there. And I'm going to start with you, Gene. I'll pick on you since you're the closest. And just want to, and also for the other artists as well, maybe make this the general question. So what do you need to know in terms of the proportionality or about any of the nuances when you do have the direction where you're going to draw like a public display of affection, or where you're going to include a gay character or a man holding another man, or any of these things that you've had to do in the past before, maybe the 49ers or things of that nature, and then anyone else on the panel who's had to do that, the JA as well, like hand holding, things of that nature. What are the nuances there? What do you have to do that's or is there anything that you have to do that's any different than a public display of affection that you might see in any normal book?
I'm just going to say that things are changing so fast. I'm 44 years old, and things are changing so fast from the incredibly, frankly, homophobic, terrified attitudes of generations how things were in my youth, to even 10 years ago, to now. It's just stunning. I mean, I remember not that long ago, the idea of having a picture of two men kissing on an ad on the side of a bus was just like, nope, the transit authority is not going to allow that. That's just way too freakish and weird, and we can't allow that. The idea of having this kind of a breakthrough of, inside of a comic it's okay to have two women kissing, but having two guys kissing, no, I don't think that's going to destroy the book. Till now, I mean, I'm going to say most of the people out there look like they're about half my age, just a little bit over maybe. And it's not so much that my generation of 40-somethings and all that is changing things. It's just that you guys, and when I say you guys, I mean all of you of all ages and stuff like that, are just so open and just so pushing boundaries. You're allowing us to do this. And now I could draw two guys hugging and kissing, and that'd be fine. Well, I think even 5 years ago, there would have been an attitude of like, yeah, I think you're just pushing that a little bit too far. Let's slow down a bit. So that's how I think. I think you guys are doing a great job. I just support it and consider wonderful.
You don't get a round of applause, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to add to that. I mean, I agree with what Dean's saying. I think that just people are in general becoming more accepting and more tolerant and more open. I mean, I was raised by European parents who were very, not closed-minded, but, you know, old school, coming from small villages and things that you didn't understand, and what you didn't understand, you didn't talk about. And as you know, and I live in Toronto, which is a vast cultural city, like just all over the place, and you just immerse in it. You don't see color, you don't see, you know, sexuality, and whether it's family, like it just doesn't. I don't see it anymore. But then I go to places somewhere, and especially sometimes in the States, in certain areas, like out of the larger metropolitan areas, and then I begin to see it a little bit. And so there still is a need to, I think, push forward in that regard. But I think we definitely are, yeah, like things that we couldn't have gotten away with 10 years ago or 5 years ago are now easily accepted, which is great.
I think this is a fantastic question because it, like when you start talking the cascade of age, I think the elder statesman here. Okay, and so on the front end of my career, I was chasing after people like Andy Warhol. And when I say chasing after him, I mean really good stalker. I worked with groups like the Rolling Stones in the studio. Can't tell you what I did. Don't know you well enough. And there was an amazing Puerto Rican artist called Antonio Lopez, openly gay, one of the most amazingly gifted people I've ever been near with a pen or a pencil. And when you talk about men loving men, women loving men, nobody did it better. And we're talking the 70s. And he was a major illustrator for Vogue. He used to fly into a location. I mean, he had great clientele. He had reps in different cities. You know, I'm a little wannabe, right? I'm like, I can't believe this, you know? And so here we are now in this industry. It's the beginning new hot thing if you can do it. It's amazing what comes from what market, what time period, where it arrives, you know, and all that. So it's great to see the comic book industry addressing something that's been among us forever. You know, it's like discovering what was already there. Yeah.
Catching up with the time?
Catching up with the times, yeah.
Well, I think you're saying...
I'm sorry, just in your check something. Afterwards, if you are under the age of 26, if you can bring a note from your parents, you can give the full talk about all the stuff he's talking about.
Thank you. Nice one.
Nice one, man. I like it.
But I think it's said all the time, the web is an equalizer. And coming from the webcomic scene, it's really allowed me, I don't have to work my way up through editors and build a name for myself and then pitch that story idea and hope that maybe I can get some queerness into the story. I could just make the comic, I could be my own editor, put it up, and try to find that audience. And that's how a lot of my friends do it, and I think there's a lot of cross-pollination when you do that. A lot of people will find your website, and I think a lot of acceptance has come from the web because of that. And then that's kind of gone into the other entertainment universes. TV shows like Glee reach a really young population. And so yeah, there's that age striation there. It's becoming more and more acceptable.
Then I guess if you can come in as well, not from the artistic perspective, but then from a writing perspective, when you put that in a book, I mean, is there anything that changes, or is there anything that you would recommend to a writer in the room who would like that to be a part of the story? I mean, how do you put it in there effectively, or how would you recommend doing so?
Well, I think with any issue of diversity, whether or not it's race, gender, or sexuality, you know, at the end of the day, you're telling the story of your heart. You're telling the story that drives you. And when you're passionate about something, when you feel deeply about it, and when you have compassion for yourself, you know, not only, because it takes sometimes when telling stories that are difficult, it requires compassion for yourself as much as it does for the characters. And so, but when you're in that place, you know, of course there are, you know, when you're telling a story about something you're not really sure you understand, you know, putting yourself, like talking to people, doing your research, but at the end of the day, you know, following your heart goes a very, very long way. And And asking the difficult questions, you know, and having the courage to do so, I think is like the first step to that.
Well, first of all, I just think it's, you know, you walk from one end of the convention to the other, and you realize real quickly that it doesn't look like the Justice League from the 60s. And that we shouldn't be writing for that audience anymore. And I've just felt from the beginning that it's really important to diversify, and as Marjorie said, whether it's gender, race, on the sexual spectrum, whatever. It's people talk all the time about, you know, well, why do you have to put all these characters in your comics that are gay or that are, you know, of different race, and just let it happen organically? Well, the truth is we didn't get to where we were with so many just straight white characters organically. Decisions were made for decades that that's how it was going to be. And so we can't wait around for an organic thing to happen. And even if there is such a thing, I don't think it would happen organically. It takes people making decisions, doing the work, getting the work out there, and above all, people supporting those works. And that is what has created opening up of the industry. And then creators of diversity feel like they're welcomed in, or that there's avenues they can create these different stories and characters. And I think, you know, you do have to have passion for it, and for any story you write, really, or else it's kind of going to suck. And what I'm loving seeing too is we're getting more artists in the industry who also have this passion, because there is a problem sometimes that you ask for a different body shape or a different skin tone, and it might either start out that way and then it slowly slides back to more curvy, bigger boobs, lighter skin, or, you know, you can't seem to get an artist to get it right from the beginning. And so we need people who can do that and are just as passionate about it, so that we can, you know, not make it seem fake or not real or not honest. And so I'm looking for getting more and more diverse creators that are passionate about those things.
So I'm going to ask another kind of general writing question here. I think one of the root things that we talk about in demographics, or talk about just in the description of the panel, talking about mirroring real-world diversity, is that many of these books, especially if they're kind of the big two, they take place in the real world. They're in New York, they're in Los Angeles, they're in Chicago, they're in Washington, D.C., they're in these real-world places. And America very much is going to look more in the future like, let's say, a New York City subway. And I'm just saying, what about the background characters? I mean, in a book, I mean, kind of the diversity that's on the periphery that's trying to depict real life, because in some cases, or especially if you're looking perhaps at older material, where you'll see, or even in a film today, perhaps you'll see, again, that subway station that's full of just white people, and that's not a real thing. It's more fictional or fantastic in many aspects than some of the other things. So how do you, as an artist, how much freedom do you have just to say, like, well, this is more like what the scene should actually look like? I mean, how do you get just the characters of color in the periphery, or make sure that they're always there, at least in the background, before you even start talking about, of course, the lead characters in the books, and just reflecting, again, real life?
Well, I mean, I've actually specifically had to request people of color in my books, like in the script, because if I don't, the mainstream, like the assumption is that everyone's going to be white. And so I will say, no, like this character is biracial, she's black, and you know, and I'll get the colors back, and she'll still be white. And I'll be like, yeah, let's you know, she's black. And so they'll be like, okay, well, you know, and so I'll get the colors back, and she'll look tan. And I'll be like, okay, you know what, let's have this conversation a third time. And it's really weird, like this resistance.
It's very weird.
There's an incredible resistance sometimes, and not sometimes, all the time, you know, to diversify and bring in people of color into these books. And honestly, like, I don't know why I'm surprised, because when we look at television, when we look at the CW, we look at NBC, we look at all these major shows on TV, we look at film, I mean, you would think that the only people who exist in this country are white. And that it's only white people who are having adventures. It's only white people who are like falling in love and having relationships and being attorneys and like going out and doing their thing. And where people of color are always in the periphery. Like, they're not the ones who have the adventures. And so it requires like this, you know, sometimes almost aggressive approach where you just have to be very persistent and say, okay, you know what, this is what the real world looks like, and this is what we need, and we're not getting it, and I'm just going to keep yakking at you until you really, like, you answer the call.
That's why I don't like the term "let it happen organically." It doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to add just a little something to the concept that, you know, you brought up. Once I was doing a illustration for, here we go with age, a set of film strips. You know? And this is for an educational company, and the theme was the prevention of child abuse. So one was about how children could identify it, how adults could identify it, and what the role of educators and people in healthcare was if they would identify it. And so it's all these illustrations. And it had to be scrutinized by the moral majority, so you know the time period it was. So they would literally pull out a calculator to see how many times I had indicated the abuser as a white male and tell me, no, he now has to become Chinese, he has to become African American, he has to become Mexican, and if he is the white male, he can't be the white male that's the plumber, because white men are not plumbers. And so he had to be the executive. And they're going back and forth. Now the beauty of this, I got to draw a whole lot of illustrations. I was drawing. But it was all these handprints. And I called it orthodoxy, because at the time, there was a radical thing going on in the East, and orthodoxy. And so I call it a kind of industrial orthodoxy that we have to grapple with.
So yeah, if we can get more input from the artists on the panel, when you get a script, I mean, that doesn't specify, as you say there, well, unfortunately, you did get a script that specified but how do you work in that, or do you ever get any pushback, or if it is kind of more accurate or true to life with that in terms of depictions of people of color?
I got it. Okay. Oh, no, move forward.
I'll just say that most of my editors are guys from New York City or California and stuff like that. So if and you know, maybe it's before I started in the '90s. I've not really had a problem with that. If I throw in diversity and stuff like that, it's just that so many people don't think to include it. If I do include it, usually it doesn't bother. You know, it's never bothered an editor. They never complain there are too many black characters or too many Latino characters or too many Asian characters in the background and stuff like that. Maybe just the guys who hire me aren't the guys who do that. But it's also what they were pointing out. Remembering to include that is something even I have to kind of do because I'm so immersed in the comics and the TV shows I grew up in the 70s, where the idea of we're going to have an incredibly diverse cast. We're going to have these 4 guys who are going to save the world. And one of them's going to have black hair, brown hair, red hair, and yellow hair. They're all going to be totally different. And, you know, just for me to even run, that's a little hard sometimes. But I enjoy drawing people looking very different. One of the things I love doing at conventions is just doing portraits of the fans who come up and stuff like that, and saying, I'll draw you as a superhero. And this is great practice for me because, you know, comic book fans look like everything. But a lot of people have one heroic male face they know how to draw, and one heroic female face they know how to draw.
And body types.
And body types. Oh yeah. And then ask them to diversify that and draw a beautiful black woman who looks like a black woman, and who isn't going to have to be fixed, hopefully, by the colorist to kind of look like a black woman. But it's kind of, I'm just going to do this thing. It's nothing to do with comic books, but back when I was in college in Detroit, I drive from the suburbs to Detroit, back. I was living in Detroit to go to college, and they had a Virginia Slims ad on a billboard or something like that, or some product like that, where it had this white model using the product, something like that, this beautiful white woman, you know, long, curly, reddish brown hair, something like that. And then I drove into Detroit, and they had exactly the same billboard there, except they had used their pre-Photoshop technology to make her have a brown skin tone. And it's like, okay, that's so annoying. That's so annoying. You know, that's what the comic books look like, you know, sometimes, where you just see these characters like, yeah, you really don't understand the difference between what an Asian person looks like, and Latino, and white, and black. And it's not like there's a certain type, but there's just, again, look around this room, or look at the white people in the room, look at the black people in the room, look at everyone in the room, and there's so much variety, and there's a way to draw, you know, when I get to draw a fan, I'm glad I'm going to cut out soon, because there's so many interesting people here, of course. But there's, I mean, I could really take anyone in this room and draw a really nice portrait of them and make them look heroic. And if you understand what's good about each person's face and what's really interesting about that face, it's not that they look like you're one, you know, the ingrained in me drawing. I can doodle Superman pretty much in my sleep because that's what I grew up drawing. But learning to go beyond that is fun, and it's what makes you an interesting artist and makes it, you know, fun drawing things.
That leads into my next question then. So again, for the artist, how important is it to present a diverse portfolio, do you think, now, where you're showing different shading techniques, different skin colorations, you're showing different, groups of facial features or body types? Would you say not just presenting that one heroic body type because you've seen that at Marvel or you've seen that at the DC? Isn't that something as an artist that is important just to be able to present, a larger body of work, or that you can do anything you're asked to do?
Well, I think so. But I think the problem with a lot of comic book artists, and this is probably changing, but a lot of comic book artists learn from comic books, and predominantly comic books are white. I grew up in and also people will reference what they know. So if you're from a predominantly white area of the country, you're just going to draw white people. But I grew up in a small town outside of Toronto where I lived, which had a big cultural festival every summer. And you'd have expos of all the different, like African-American, Polish, Jewish, Spanish, Mexican, so you'd be surrounded by all this culture. I was thrown into cultural school on Sundays, and a great way for my parents to get rid of me while I was away at the time. But, so I was constantly surrounded by a variety of people, so I kind of just brought that in, and as you were saying that I like drawing different faces. I don't like drawing the heroic. Maybe that's why I've never been successful in drawing in superhero comics for the most part. I've done a lot of my work outside of it, but it's like I prefer drawing the interesting features, the big noses, or the elderly people, or just people who have seen a life or whatever it might be, but just different body shapes, different physiques, heights. I always find it funny, like Wolverine, who's supposed to be 5 feet tall, always appears about 6 feet tall in comic books. And I was like, well, no. So when I got my chance to do X-Men, I was like, no, I'm going to draw him. He's going to be talking up to some of the students because he's a 5-foot guy. And so I think it just really, for some artists, you have to actually push the envelope and think outside your own box. And if you're lucky enough, like if you've grown up around more diversity, like if you're from New York or Toronto or Chicago, even that you're surrounded by it, hopefully you bring that to the table. And that by you doing that naturally, you're going to change the system.
And then if you do want to see Ramon's superhero work, Spider-Man learning to crawl.
I'd like to add to that. When I was in art school, the School of the Art Institute, you have to take the L, subway, bus, had a job, got a lot of things going on, so I had my sketchbook, and I would draw the people on the bus, on the train. And I would try to sit in the same position, so the interior is the same, and I'm drawing you, and I'm drawing you. And like you say, I'm getting free models, right? I'm getting just, all this humanity that I'm drawing. Of course, occasionally there'd be someone that say, girl, what's he doing over there in the seat? But over time, it gave me just this total exercise of one, drawing fast, and then capturing the nuance, the subtleties, and then going back and understanding an aesthetic appreciation. I go back and I'm like, man, this guy had a terrific look. I didn't even know that when I was drawing. But, you start really understanding where the nuances of power and beauty and sorrow or hard day shows up in the face of somebody that doesn't look anything like you. But that's what you're catching when you're catching and drawing like that. So hopefully that carries over to when you get these assignments, that you start pulling, not consciously, but you start pulling. I believe with most artists, everything we see is registered.
Yeah.
It's in there.
You're absorbing the concept.
It's in there. It's in there. And so you could be drawing and say, hey, that's that guy that I saw somewhere. He's just going to be in there, because you're not always running to a photo reference or something like that. So, you're going to come from your mind. So for me, that was a big asset. And I had a tenure where I was a courtroom illustrator for WGN. Now, that's insane.
I actually have a big book of mug shots I refer to. It's like,
oh, wow.
It's all the
to draw criminals.
Well, not even just for criminals, though. It's all it's called the most unwanted. So it's not the famous criminals, it's all the regular people, and just the variety of faces you get to this thing, and it starts from the 1920s up to present, and it's just amazing, the history and the character and all these faces. It's amazing.
And then just to transition to kind of a writing question here, we've been talking about characters on the periphery, and I want to talk about the primary characters here that represent that real-world diversity, and I'm very happy to have a panel that is able to do that with their own work. And wanted to start on the writing end there. Just again, for essentially giving people advice here on the old adage, right? You know, how to not do that. How do you write outside of your experience for people who don't have that shared experience, for people who, again, are experiencing that same problem that the artist mentioned, where they're not maybe growing up in a community where they have those diverse lived experiences or don't have that lived experience themselves to offer. Where do you suggest that they go, and what was it for you that made you decide that you wanted to, for Gail specifically, you just wanted to put as many of those characters out there? You have a lot.
Okay, I grew up in a very isolated farm outside of a very tiny town in Oregon where I was the oddest thing there, having red hair. So that was the diversity, and I'm not even kidding. And it's just a matter of looking at the world and identifying with other people and the way they feel. And when I first came into comics, there was a serious problem with female characters. So that was kind of my secret agenda, is I want to show that we can have successful female characters that are three-dimensional, well-rounded, different body shapes, look different, they don't have the stereotypes that we were seeing in the comics. And then you start attending conventions and talking to the readers and looking around, and you start to realize there's more issues than just creating strong female characters. We need strong characters of all kinds that we don't have. And, you know, it just became very important to me to, you know, I had talked to an editor when I first got into the industry, and I said, hey, what is your percent? This was a high-up editor, one of the big two, I don't want to use names, but I said, what is the percentage of your female readership? And he literally said, I do not know, and I do not care. So it's like saying that you don't exist as a reader. And when you're making these constant decisions to have a really non-diverse world, then you're basically saying that these people are invisible, and I didn't like that.
So just to kind of comment on the economics of that, that's a horrible thing to say. Economically, let's leave out half of the population.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I started saying eventually when you start talking to people who worry about the numbers. You know, it's like, why are you cutting out 50% of your potential audience? Or 25%, or whatever, you know, when we're talking about getting diversity. And, you know, so if you're not talking about the moral aspect of it, then let's talk about the financial aspect. And now they're finally, you know, catching up. Because of you guys.
Yeah. But there's still a long way to go, too. Oh, my gosh. But I think along those lines, keeping your eyes open and looking at the world in a different way also requires looking for the silences. Because so many of us are erased. And, you know, we're erased from entertainment, we're erased from movies, we're erased from books, we're erased from comics. And so looking for the absences, you know, the absence of people of color, looking for the absence of women, you know, and finding a way to, you know, fill the gap, but mindfully. And mindfully means, you know, stepping back and examining, like I step back and I examine my own privilege. You know, everyone has a different kind of privilege. Men have, you know, male privilege. Every woman knows about male privilege. Men know about male privilege, they're just not aware of it. You know, the privilege of being white, the privilege of being, you know, whatever, straight, just, you know, you name it. And looking back and taking stock of like who I am and, you know, what I can offer and what I know. And so, for example, when I, you know, did the wedding issue for Astonishing X-Men, you know, what I knew was this issue of people being denied. And, you know, my parents, I'm biracial, my parents married 10 years after the Supreme Court finally declared it unconstitutional to ban mixed marriages. Just 10 years. I mean, this is really recent. Like, we take for granted that we can marry whomever we want, but it wasn't so long ago that that was not the case. And so I knew this. And so I integrated this into my work when I was writing about Kyle and North Star. And things like this, again, like looking to life experiences, you know, molding them, using them to form like a new way of looking at the world and a new kind of compassion is very, very important to the work as well. But again, just, you know, I can't stress enough, there is so much that needs to be done, and there's so much that we don't even see. You know, I've come from like writing romance, the world of writing romance novels, and I'm sorry, but everyone there is white. And you would like, and we take it for granted. Romance readers, you know, the writers, all of that. It's like we write these books and the readership is incredibly diverse. The readership comes, it's incredibly diverse. Many people of color, you know, it's like straight, gay, everyone, all, you know, so women read romance novels, but they don't look like the real world. And we take it for granted because we're so used to it, we're so acclimated to this, you know, to this very like wide way of looking at things. And
by our own culture sometimes.
we do. And so, you know, again, looking for the absences and trying to find a way to fix that. Even if it's outside our reading experience, but just asking the questions. You know, first of all, asking the questions, because that's the best step of all, and then moving forward.
I'd like to scaffold on that. That's fantastic. The idea of diversity and empowerment, like you say on the other side of privilege, to understand that there's power. There's easily over 100 people here. You guys have like all the power to go to any vendor and say, how come this graphic novel collection on the shelf is not as diverse as what I see when I go to iTunes and look at music? You know, when you go to iTunes, there's more going on than the Beatles. Okay, so what are we talking about? Spider-Man kind of hit when the Beatles did. Superman hit when who? Benny Goodman hit? Okay. All right. You know, Batman hit when Public Enemy #1 was James Cagney, right? Okay. So their music isn't stuck like that, right? So why isn't it mimic the other? I was on an interview scenario with diversifying the comic book industry with GQ magazine, and I posed a question back to them. I said, why isn't your graphic novel collection as black as your music collection? And kind of crashed the interview. And so if you want to see an answer, of course, I'll do a pitch. Go to onlystudios.com. We'll happily share that information with you. But when you, as either interested, emerging creators, or consumers, realize you have power. See, that's the other thing that goes with the privilege. You have power. Most vendors, if they're smart, so I'm leaving money on the table, they don't see you in isolation. They see you as the voice for probably 1,000 more people to think just like you. So when you come in saying, I'm backing off of this, because this doesn't represent where I think I want to go with my money and with my time and with my appreciation, then they start looking for people like who's on this panel to say, wait a minute, there's a voice out here that's asking for you. And so it's important that you share that with the people you go to purchase with, or your colleagues that are creating, because a lot of you are creating. And so I'm saying, do not at all undervalue that the power is on that side of the table, okay, with you guys. And that it's important that you manifest that power and be heard in these circles.
I'm going to have just a few quick individual questions here because we're getting pretty close, so I want to make sure that that we get a chance for some fan questions here. We can get a microphone, so if you guys just want to kind of form a queue as soon as we let you know, and then just kind of get close enough, I may be able to get this one out to you guys. But I wanted to ask you specifically, Turtel, about, because you've had the experience of running conventions. And obviously I was very fortunate. I was able to put together, even before the guest list was really getting concrete, I was able to know who had been here in the past, or I was able to reach out and find out perhaps who were these creators in the Midwest, but I had to actively do that, and not every convention would be so lucky. We wouldn't be able to do this panel at every convention. And how do you, I mean, what advice do you have to people who are putting those together just to underscore the economics of it? I mean, that diversity does sell, especially at conventions. You want to cater to the folks, but just again, your input on having run conventions and how important the aspect of diversity is there.
Okay, the theme of my conventions, they're called the Black Age of Comics Convention. Now, I'll explain where it comes from. It's not anti-anybody. I always say you eat Mexican food, but you're not Mexican. You eat Thai food, but you're not Thai. And you eat Italian food, but you didn't come from So when we say it's black, we mean you. Okay, we mean you too. All right? And so you have to be prepared to finance the convention, promote the convention. You need insurance, very important. You want to make sure everybody is taken care of when they hurt themselves, or his main art valise, portfolio, whatever he's calling it, walks out the room, it's been liberated, and he tells us how much money it's worth. It's not in my bank account, but my insurance company will cover it. So you want to have that. You want to have security. I used to actually, believe it or not, go to the local police commander and get plainclothesmen to come to the event. And one time I messed with him. I'm like, where's your ticket? I didn't know he was plainclothesman, right? I made him pay. But the point is, you want to make sure everybody is safe and secure. You want to take care of your janitorial staff. They are the most important people after security. Okay? Last thing you want is the so-called cleaning lady to leave that nasty mop in the room where you're doing a panel like this. Okay? So you want to take care of all those people. And then you want to take care of your creative people, your talent. And the thing that I found, I did 15 conventions over a 20-year period. There is a huge market that gets serviced when you start doing independent conventions. You know, it's a huge market. And in fact, we met last year at PocketCon on the south side of Chicago. A very small, very nice, dedicated group. We were having a ball. It's like a big love in, you know. And they had come to me to ask me how to organize it. So, you know, I gave them input. You know, it's really a good thing to see, because it's like music. Okay, a small convention, it's like seeing an emerging band at a small bar that's comfortable, you know, that's family-like. You know, instead of in a huge place where, you know, you're seeing them with so many other things, you know, and not every band is at its best in a big hall, right? Some are like rocking at a small bar. That's where you want to see it and experience it. So it's a great value, and you should see it from a position of value. The last few conventions I gave at the school where I was teaching, happened to be Kenwood Academy. I got some ex-students in the back. I got one right here, all right. Okay? They've all gone on to college and do great things. And the point is, the thing, if you give one, think of a high school, because you got a parking lot, you got an industrial backup, you got security, you pay cleaning people, they're all in place. And the police are happy to surround the building. Okay, they'll keep all the creeps out. You don't have to worry about a thing. And if you really want to keep the creeps out, have a cosplay event. Okay? Thugs hate it. All right? They do not cosplay. All right? They go away. You know, but it's really tremendous and worth doing. And I just say, you want to go through your checklist and understand whatever can go wrong will go wrong, so fix it before it goes wrong. And then you take care of everybody.
I had a question for you as well. We mentioned kind of, or we had referenced the work you did with Inhabit there. I think part of the reason I wanted to invite you, and what was special about that, I mean, first of all, the fact that you were the first in many cases to do that, is we're all a fan of this mythic fiction here, these great, resources that we all know. But a lot of us could probably get tired of seeing the same vampires and werewolves and things of that nature over and over again. And what you were doing is you were showcasing this entire font of something that people may be unaware of, but that doesn't mean they will not be popular. You had some really amazing beasties. I wonder if you can kind of talk about that, and maybe what you think of the value of looking to other places for those kind of mythic creatures, for that mythic reference that filled that void.
Well, it was interesting because I was approached to do the project, and I've always had a love of mythology and religion, and just like I've always been reading up on old, whether it's Greek or Judaic or South American or whatever it might be, and so I was approached to do by the Inhabit Media, which was basically taking all these verbal myths that have been passed down from generation to generation in Inuit culture. And they found that a lot of the younger generations were kind of ignoring their histories. So basically the idea behind Inhabit Media was to try to encapsulate these stories in a modern or more interesting package to basically entice the younger generations to kind of educate them. So one idea was comic books, short animated films, textbooks with more modern illustrations, for lack of a better term. So basically I was approached with a few other artists, and basically we were giving all of this mythology and particular creatures, and the Inuit have some very, very dark, they made sure their kids did not go off the beaten path, because basically they would either be eaten or their eyes would be plucked out by certain creatures or whatever. So it was kind of like, I was like, wow, I thought like the boogeyman was here when I was a kid, but these kids did not leave the igloo. And it was great. Like, I did probably over 100 illustrations for them, and some were a little bit repetitive, but it was actually a lot of fun. I was given these myths that were transcribed. And then all the art was then taken to the Elder Council in northern Canada, and all the elders would go over all the art to make sure it kind of, I guess, sat well with. They don't want to just take it, repurpose it, and just do it. They want to make sure the people who actually,
What's tougher, a tribal chief or a Marvel editor?
I got less changes from the tribal chiefs, I'll be honest. But yeah, anyway, so it was actually a very fascinating experience to actually do that and be a part of that kind of movement. And it's actually kind of exploded. They've had a few films in the past couple of years that have gone on to tour and educate. And it was actually just a culture that I was, even though, it's part of my country, where I'm from, but it's something that we're vastly unaware of. Like, none of it, the province just got, I think it was, I remember when I was in high school, which was probably, 25, 30 years ago, I remember my geography teacher mentioning that there was talk of a new province forming that was, represent the Inuit Nation. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I didn't hear anything about it. And then literally like 20 years later, it was finally came to pass where there was like finally a body of, politicians and representatives, and the actual province was formed. And I was like, wow, that took a long time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just for a little bit of tidbit of knowledge, my geography teacher. So it's actually great that I can have just add my own little 2 cents to the experience.
It goes back to that lived experience, the time scale that we're talking about for all of this change.
Yeah, so you throw a pebble at one point, it's going to ripple out eventually, and changes will get larger and larger as you go along.
Yeah. And then just kind of a question, the last one here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the fans here. Like I said, just kind of start forming a queue now if you would like, just behind kind of where the last row is there, where the last chairs there. Don't go further than that. Just go so we can get you guys. And then not too far. Not too far. Just sorry about the lack of a microphone there. We had to have some sharing here. So, but yeah, I wanted to ask for the folks here who are moving on to do creator-owned properties, or have already done so in Jay and Turtel's case. And I think you're moving as well to do that. What is different about that, and is that one of the areas where you're hoping to, again, kind of put out some more diversity, where you're not going to have any resistance to say, yeah, I can make the character whatever color, whatever gender, whatever creed I want, because you have the freedom as a creator, and how important do you think that is in kind of disrupting that whole thing, getting more diversity on?
It's very, very important. I think you were talking earlier about looking for those spaces where it's silent, like finding those deficits in storytelling, and that was one of those things that inspired me to start the Boy in Pink Earmuffs. I didn't see those young queer characters. I didn't see that experience that I had as a kid. For whatever reason, obvious reasons, homosexuality is sexualized. It's there in the word, but there's this sort of twilight period before puberty where it's all very innocent. It's holding hands, giving Valentines. It's sort of the Peanuts gallery love. And I wanted to see that represented somewhere. There's a great line in Parks and Recreation, one of the first episodes, where Leslie Knope accidentally marries 2 penguins. And I love that it wasn't like a political thing for her. It was, I firmly believe that it's cute. It's cute. And that's the story that I want to get out there. It's cute. It's a real thing. It's something I experienced at that age. And it's cute.
And then see if Jean or Gail or anybody who's moving in that direction wanted to comment as well.
Well, I've been doing it in mainstream comics as well, but I am doing more creator-owned stuff, and I did a Kickstarter with Jim Calafiore called Leaving Megalopolis, which has a very diverse cast, including age diversity. And then I have some new projects coming out in early 2015 that also will have a very diverse cast.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, when you talk creator-owned, for those that don't know, that means the writer that conceived the character owns it. In a perfect world, retains the rights to it. And in a real imperfect world, will have a lot of things to say, and a lot of things to say in that character, and has to struggle of making that happen. You know, the reason why I call that the imperfect part, because that's the surprise. You're like, whoops, I created this, I own this, and then as you move, it moves. So I like to think most of us, when we have our own properties, it's more internal. We have a lot of things to say and a lot of ways to say it. And then these properties gives us a voice, and then we craft on it and build on it. And it is property. It's property like real estate is property. You know, it's your home, it's your character, you know, you build on it. At Only Studios, I have a line of products which, of course, I own, but I publish other people's products, and I don't mess with their copyrights. If they don't have a copyright, I sit with them and make sure they get a copyright before I publish it. Because I want to make it clear, it is yours, you own it. And I think a lot of creative people are just so happy to get something out, they forget, oops, I didn't register it. You know, and don't believe, not that you guys asked for this, but don't believe putting it in the mail and mailing it to yourself and not opening the envelope until you're in a court of law is going to help you.
I need to get to the post office.
Okay?
I'm sorry.
They would just say, glad the mailman did it. You must have a registered copyright with the Library of Congress if you want to win that case. And I know, because I had to win that case and I had one. So you want to do that, but that's when you know you own your character. That's the level of ownership. And then the other things come with your life experiences and your skill set with your ability to articulate it or to invite other people in to expand your character.
Did you want to say anything as well, Gene? Or?
Oh, sure. It's kind of going a little aside on stuff, but let me just ask a quick raising hands. Who here is interested in writing their own stories or drawing their own stories? Okay, so,
all right.
More than I expected. Okay. So we're moving into this new world now where when I was a kid, you know, there's like 3 television networks and, you know, 20 comic books, 32 comic books in the United States and stuff like that. And you wanted to go for the biggest slice of the population as possible, and you didn't want to surprise or shock anybody. And, you know, so part of the reason of doing white people is, you know, white majority, so, you know, do white characters. We're all going to fight for that same slice of the pie and stuff like that, and everyone else has to eat the same thing. Everyone, you know, McDonald's, everyone eats Big Macs or Quarter Pounders. That's your choice. Now, if you look at the stuff that you probably like yourself, you and your closest friends probably have something that you're incredibly passionate about that the people just outside your circle have no idea what it is or don't understand why you like it. But the thing is, it's something where you're willing to support the creator and put in money to actually buy it instead of download it illegally or something like that and get it free. When you create something, you want to make something where people care about it, where it feels so personal to them. They would rather pay $20 for a poster than to download a wallpaper for free that they got off some pirate, you know, pirate site or something like that. You want people to care about it and feel like they have ownership in it. You want people to be passionate. If you go for that lowest common denominator like they did in the 70s, people will be like, oh, well, yeah, that reminds me of a lot of other stuff I've read, and it's disposable to them. They don't care. It's economic suicide nowadays to use that strategy.
All right, now we have our first question. We're getting to turn it over.
Okay, you all have mentioned that, and it is pretty obvious here, that the geek sphere is incredibly diverse. So how do you react to comments made by fellow artists like Cue the Groans, Mark Millar and Todd McFarlane, who have publicly dismissed the need for more diversity within comics and within geekdom? I actually went to one of Gail's panels on Friday night, so I know you had that instance where, but I don't understand why women don't read comics. He said, do you see the line waiting for me? So, I mean, how do you personally as artists react, and how do you get them to break that bubble when it's painfully obvious that diversity pays off in the geek sphere?
Let them have their opinion and then go the right way.
Can I go with you on that?
Yeah.
Tell them to get this book. Okay, very good book. Answers all those questions.
For me, like, I feel like that again is just another example of privilege. That's another, and by privilege I don't mean, what I mean is, well, there's a long line. So anyway, but that is an example of people who, these individuals, again, they are so deeply ensconced in their sort of, in their privilege and their position, that not only does diversity not matter? But, but it's unseen. Like, it's just they're blind.
Yeah, I just thought it was super ironic that Todd McFarlane, the creator of Spawn,
Exactly.
publicly dismissed the need for diversity in comics.
I'm going to say I'm sorry because I realized how the problem with one of these discussions is that we had a 3-hour breakfast because we were wanting to talk about some of these things. For those of you who don't get your question answered, come see me after the panel. I'm going to write stuff down and to whatever extent possible send emails to the panelists and see if they are able to respond.